Does looking at a 360 Hz OLED monitor bring you unbearable pain because of how slow it is? Well, great news, because today I'm going to be reviewing MSI's brand new MAG 272QP X50, what a name, 500 Hz QD OLED monitor. And let's start off with the specs. So we're talking about a 27-inch 1440p QD OLED panel with an alleged 0.03 millisecond response time. Yes, it has G-Sync and FreeSync support, and now an HDR 500 true black rating, which means yes, this is brighter than older OLED panels as well, which will be great for its HDR presentation. We'll get into that later. Now, as per usual, MSI is going with the gray plastic shell on this thing with a bit of a gamer accent to it on the back, but overall, I do think it looks pretty good still and should fit in the vast majority of environments without being, say, an eyesore. Now, it does also have standard 100 by 100 millimeter VESA mounting support if you don't like the stand it comes with, which is great. And in terms of the ports, you're getting two HDMI 2.1, one DisplayPort 1.4a, and one Type-C with 15 watt power delivery, and a headphone out if you're one of those psychopaths who actually uses that. Yes, there will be an upgraded MPG model, which does come with DisplayPort 2.1, but I want to preface, guys, fellas, before we all start screaming, look, NVIDIA has solved the majority of their problems when it comes to display stream compression issues, so I think the vast majority of people won't have a problem, as display stream compression, which you will be using over DisplayPort 1.4a, actually is visually lossless. I can tell you, you will not be able to tell the difference. No, I have not been able to measure any latency difference either. There may just be some cards out there with some minor bugs related to display stream compression. And finally, MSI is targeting between $830 to around $850 for the price point, though that's not locked in and could change, and it will come with the standard 3-year plus burn-in warranty. Also, I do want to let you guys know that MSI did loan me this monitor for review, but of course, that's not going to be changing my opinions. With that out of the way, let's dive into the picture. I mean, how is 500 Hertz gaming? And I gotta tell you, it is without a doubt the clearest and fastest that I have ever experienced out of any display, period. And typically I save gaming for later, but let's just dive right into that first, because let's be honest, the majority of you watching this are not gonna be into doing color grading on this monitor. Could you? We'll talk about that later. But you probably wanna see just how fast this monitor is and how great it looks in motion. And taking a look here at my chart measuring the total system latency in milliseconds, well, you can see that the MSI MAG 272QP X50 is at 500 Hertz, the fastest. This is the new king, fastest monitor I have ever measured. Now, it is by just 1 millisecond, and it's pretty arguable whether or not you'll actually be able to feel the difference between 23 or 22 milliseconds. But if you want the fastest monitor that money can buy, yes, currently, based on my data, this is it. But what about the motion performance? Because this is honestly the real reason I think most people would consider this monitor. Sure, 1 millisecond faster is great and all, but that's probably not gonna bring you from rookie 4 all the way to a diamond rank in your games. But motion performance definitely can make a larger impact. I mean, take a look here at the 500 Hertz image that I've captured. It is so close to the example image on the left there that you can almost barely tell the difference, at least at a distance. There's basically no visible trailing whatsoever, and you can easily make out that it says better than 60 Hertz on the moving UFO. That's very impressive and does lead to a situation where basically almost no matter how fast things are moving in your game, you're likely going to be able to make out exactly what it looks like and track it properly, something that might not be the case at lower refresh rates. Now, to be fair, at 360 Hertz, you can just about make out what it's saying as well, so I don't think there's a huge jump between 360 and 500 Hertz, but there is some noticeable blurring on the text and the UFO in motion, even at 360 frames per second. And this only gets more egregious as you get down to 240, and then at 120, you really can't even read the text. And then at 60 Hertz, well, I just wouldn't recommend gaming at all in 2025 at 60 Hertz, unless you have to. Now, to be fair, maybe I'm a little bit elitist, but I do feel like 120 Hertz and higher in gaming is definitely a noticeable upgrade. Though I will say, when you look at this image just from afar, it's clear to me that the diminishing returns start to set in at 240 Hertz. I feel like 240 Hertz is very good, and while jumping from 240 to 360 or from 360 to 500 is noticeable and appreciable in games, don't expect it to once again turn you from the worst gamer in the universe all the way into some sort of professional G Fuel boofing monster. It's just not gonna happen. It'll make you possibly better, but how much better is certainly questionable. Now, I will tell you, my time using the monitor actually playing games, I did feel like I was playing just a little tiny bit better than I ever had on any other display. The extra tiny bit of reduction in latency and the extra small improvement in motion performance over 360 Hertz was noticeable, it was appreciable, and possibly even more importantly, it made it more satisfying to play those games. I mean, maybe it won't make you better at your games, who knows? It's gonna really depend on your skill versus a 360 Hertz monitor. But I do think for those of you out there chasing faster and faster refresh rates, it will make you enjoy the games more, simply because as we get higher and higher in terms of refresh rate, at least in my opinion, it makes the games feel more and more real. And for that reason, those of you out there who are really into super fast refresh rate monitors, I think you're gonna want this monitor. And by the way, if you do want it, I'll try and throw some affiliate links in the description below when it becomes available. Now, with gaming out of the way, as awesome as it is, let's talk about the actual color performance. And I do want to be clear, this is essentially sort of a pre-production model. It's not on its final firmware, so things could improve, but that's not to say that it's bad. In fact, it really isn't. Now, if you want the TLDR, go ahead and skip ahead. But for those of you out there who do really want to know how accurate it is, let's jump into the CalMan results. So taking a look here first at SDR, to be honest with you guys, it's actually pretty decent out of the box. Now, like pretty much every monitor, it does stretch colors out of the box, and there's some small inaccuracies, but this can be mostly fixed via some simple adjustments in the monitor. And I'll have the best settings for this linked in my Patreon in the description below, which by the way also gets you access to the Discord where you can talk to me directly and is the best way to support the channel. So I really appreciate everybody who supports me over there. Now, in terms of the actual color accuracy in SDR, it's also surprisingly good. An average delta E of 1.9 is below 2, which is what you want to see and very good for a gaming monitor. But in HDR, it gets a little bit worse. Now, in the HDR True Black 500 mode, I did a bunch of different window measurement tests, and overall this mode was actually pretty good. It only had a bit of under tracking and over tracking in certain window sizes, and hopefully MSI can get around to fixing that. But in the Peak 1000 mode, well, it's a bit of a disaster. Once you get above a 10% window, it starts to severely under track, and it does make scenes look a lot dimmer than they really should be. And unfortunately, MSI's capabilities to improve this may be limited, as in my private discussions with some people at various companies, it sounds like Samsung Display may actually be controlling the maximum power allowed in the higher peak brightness modes, which is very unfortunate. And I do want to see Samsung Display roll that back and allow their partners to get these monitors to get much brighter. Now, MSI has tried to find ways around this with their new EOTF boost mode. And as you can see, overall, it looks pretty decent, but it does also overtrack in some HDR tests. So the TLDR is the SDR accuracy is actually very good out of the box, and the HDR 500 True Black mode is also pretty good as well. However, the Peak 1000 mode is pretty bad, and I would recommend not using it at all. And kind of the same goes with the EOTF boost in its current form. Now, the EOTF boost mode on this monitor certainly has potential to be very, very good. It does make the screen, I'd say, the brightest out of the three modes. And if brightness is what you're after, then yeah, go ahead and use it. However, despite the fact that it shows up as not being too inaccurate in tests, in practice, it is actually significantly inaccurate when compared to the True Black 500 mode. So it does need a little bit of work so it's not blowing out too many highlights. If MSI can do that, the EOTF boost mode is significantly brighter than the Peak 1000 and will give you all of the benefits of the True Black 500 mode while still giving you those Peak 1000 highlights, making this potentially the best mode if final firmware solves it. And if they do, I'll be sure to let you guys know. Speaking of brightness, let's jump into HDR. How is the HDR experience on this monitor, considering that it has the brand new Display HDR True Black 500 certification instead of 400? Well, it is certainly noticeably brighter. Is it a massive leap? No, because to be honest with you guys, previous monitors were pretty close to being able to achieve the True Black 500 mode, so they weren't too far off. However, I will say the full screen brightness is a nice improvement. I mean, I actually did measure over 330 nits in a full screen, which is a big jump over the roughly anywhere from 270 to 280 you saw on last generation QD OLEDs, and that does make this a lot better for desktop use, which is great. But in HDR, it still honestly is just a little bit disappointing, especially when you compare it to OLED TVs. Don't get me wrong, I do recommend turning HDR on this monitor. It's gonna be significantly better than SDR. And if you've never used HDR before, do it because it's gonna blow your mind. But when you've seen what OLED TVs can do these days, it's just a joke in comparison. I'll tell you right now, it's about 5 times brighter on TVs, and that does make a big impact on how HDR is presented. But if we take a look at this monitor compared to other 1440p options, well, it does very well. I mean, we're talking about a monitor which is in the top half of my peak window brightness graph, which is very impressive for QD OLED. It's typically much dimmer than these MLA W OLEDs, but here it's pretty much keeping up right with a lot of them. Likewise, in a real HDR game, which is Baldur's Gate 3, we can see that it's doing pretty well. Once again, at the top half of the graph, or kind of in the middle, trading blows with even some of the W OLEDs. So big improvement in HDR brightness, but honestly, nowhere near big enough. We needed a 2 or 3x improvement to brightness to bring it to a space where HDR really wows you. And we're just not there yet, and it might be a little while till we get there. But the enhanced brightness along with the perfect black levels of OLED makes this, in a dark room, a very excellent HDR monitor, especially considering that you also get the insane near instant response times of OLED, which is just absolutely awesome. Overall, QD OLED is just such a great technology. But what about the finish? Is MSI sticking with glossy, or did they join the dark side and go to matte? Well, great news, they are sticking with a glossy coating, but that also does have its negatives as well. I mean, to be fair, you will see more defined reflections in a glossy coating, but the real downside of the coating they're using right now is that it's easy to scratch, and it does, unfortunately, well, this isn't necessarily the coating's fault, but QD OLED has an issue with ambient light. Whether they use a matte coating or glossy coating, it's gonna turn somewhat purple, and your contrast is gonna get absolutely destroyed, and I mean annihilated, in a room where you have a decent amount of light coming in, whether it's from a window, overhead lights, or even light coming in through an open door. This will annihilate your contrast on a QD OLED and make it look closer to an LCD than an OLED. So for the love of God, if you're gonna buy a QD OLED, make sure you control your lighting if you're trying to get a good HDR image out of your display. If you're not, it probably won't matter to you, and that's totally fine. And don't get me wrong, QD OLED is the best technology on the market today for monitors, despite the magenta issue. And I'm very glad they stuck with a glossy coating, as it leads to a much more vibrant, a much more deep, and a much clearer image than anything else you can buy in the market today. I'll be honest with you guys, if you're using a regular matte monitor right now, or an LG W OLED with its matte coating, if you've never used a monitor with a glossy coating, it is worth buying this monitor for that alone. The improvement to image quality cannot be stated enough. It is an insane improvement to the clarity and vibrancy that will absolutely blow your mind. However, I do want to mention, because they are using a triangular RGB subpixel arrangement still, you will get some fringing on the edges of text, and because you're at 1440p, yes, compared to 4K, it is going to have a slight blurring to the image or pixelization depending on your viewing distance that 4K does a really great job of cleaning up. So this is more geared towards gaming than something like content creation. Just be aware of that. And also, my uniformity as well as viewing angles on this thing was nearly perfect. No major banding. You can see it perfectly at any angle, which is awesome. So let's move on to the menu and firmware, which was honestly also awesome. And you should be able to shrink the screen to a smaller size as well. Although on my current firmware, it's bugged. It will be fixed. So I didn't do a whole lot of testing at that. But if you want a smaller screen instead of 27 inches, you should be able to do that. And it does have one issue, as with all OLEDs, and that's that you're gonna get some VRR flicker at low frame rates, especially when your frame rate is going up and down, up and down. So on this monitor, it honestly wasn't too bad. So overall, is it worth picking up a 500 Hertz QD OLED, and should you get the 272QP? And I'll be honest with you, if you're not on an OLED right now, or if you're on an older W OLED, absolutely yes. It's gonna be a massive improvement in clarity, vibrancy, color, speed, and if you're on an LCD, contrast as well. However, if you're on a current 360 Hertz QD OLED, I would only recommend upgrading if you are someone who seriously plays competitive games very, very frequently. You will notice the difference. It's just not gonna be a huge night and day one that you might get if you're on a different panel like I mentioned earlier. And with how awesome this thing is, despite the fact that it's still on early firmware, I think that this is honestly as close to perfect that you can get with a gaming monitor. And in my opinion, this is right now purely for gaming only, and only for those of you out there looking for the fastest gaming monitor. This is, in my opinion, right now, out of every display that I've tested, the best gaming monitor, period. It is intensely fast, just insanely quick, both in terms of response times and input lag. It's absolutely unbeatable, and the picture quality is the best out of any 1440p monitor that I've ever tested this far as well. And so for that reason, I'm giving this one a solid 8 out of 10, and I do highly recommend it. Once again, I'll have affiliate links once it goes live, but as for now, it's still not gonna be live until, let me check, mid to late Q3 of 2025. So I have this thing way ahead of time. It's probably gonna be, by the time you see this video, a month or two after this video goes live until you can actually purchase it. But thankfully, you'll be equipped to know that this monitor is awesome before it even released.